sir. News from the underground.
Brutality on street. Casualty is
Hello, welcome to The Underground. This is the podcast where we talk about the world and how crazy and weird and messed up it is. I'm your host, Duncan Michael McPherson. Today on the podcast, there was an announcement made today about Canada and the legitimacy of the Emergency Measures Act that was used by Justin Trudeau during the Freedom Convoy of 2021. So a judge, Paul Rouleau, I believe is how you say his name, did an investigation and said that the Emergency Measures Act that Justin Trudeau used was legitimate and that it met the, I think he worded it like the very high criteria of what it needed to meet to be warranted and justified. I think the justified is the word they're going to use. This is outrageous, and I'm going to explain to you just how outrageous this actually is, because it's probably even more outrageous than what you think. So if you already disagree with it, put your seatbelt on and get ready. So I'm going to go over to an article in the Windsor Star. I want to look at a couple of things that he said. So here, the highlighted areas here. Governments should have to give the commission, that's him and his team or whatever, comprehensive statements setting out the factual and legal basis for the declaration and measures adopted, including the view of the Minister of Justice of Canada as to whether the decision was consistent with the purposes and provisions of the Emergencies Act and whether the measures taken under the Act were necessary and consistent with the Charter. The government did not give the Commission, this Paul Rouleau, any of that information when they submitted this. Government documents and information should not be redacted on account of irrelevance or on account of national security, confidentiality, and similar public interest privileges. So a lot of the documents that were submitted to them were redacted, meaning they blacked out a lot of things, which seems shady already. Governments should be bound to produce all information, advice, and recommendations given to the cabinet and its committees or ministers. So the government withheld a lot of information. One other thing that it says in there somewhere is that it was very slow to get the commission the information, but he still said that it was justified, which is ridiculous. Here's why it's ridiculous. I'm going to switch to the War Measures Act. This is just a Wikipedia page about the War Measures Act, which was created in 1914. See, in 1988, the Emergencies Act was passed, and the War Measures Act was repealed as a consequence. So they replaced the War Measures Act that they used during World War I. They replaced it with the Emergencies Act. The reason this is so outrageous is because this act was meant for war. It was meant for, really, really serious things. Not a bunch of protesters who are having a party in front of the Parliament buildings, right? Not having bouncy castles and stuff in front of Parliament buildings is nothing even close to what this Emergency Measures Act was meant for. It was meant for times of war. Okay? So keep that in mind. Now let's go back to the war and see what was actually enacted during the war. It's ridiculous how powerful this is. And I don't know how much they changed, to be honest. I haven't researched how much they've changed since the First World War. But this is what the original War Measures Act was. And you can see it was replaced in 1988. It's been used a few times as the War Measures Act. This is the first time Justin Trudeau using it in 2021. Is the first time it was used as the Emergencies Act. So originally, It passed in 1914 and gave sweeping powers to cabinet. It allowed cabinet to bypass the House of Commons and the Senate, which is crazy. Instead, it could govern by order in council decree. Under the act, the government could censor and suppress communications. It could arrest, detain, and deport people without charges or trials. That is outrageous. It could control transportation, trade, and manufacturing. It could also seize private property. People could be arrested and interned for their political beliefs. Insane that they would even allow this back then for war. I mean, I understand that we're talking about war and it's a important thing, and it's a much more dangerous situation than the Freedom Convoy, but those powers are too much to not go through the House of Commons and the Senate and just be decreed from on high from our fearless leader. It's crazy to me that War Measures Act got passed back in 1914. It's even crazier to me that I know that they've probably changed it, and I don't know the extent of the powers of the Emergencies Act, but it's crazy to me that there's an act that powerful still. I would argue, and I'm trying not to be a doomsdayer or a conspiracy theorist or someone who's screaming about communism or something like that, but really, if we have that as a tool in the government, are we really a free country? I'm not trying to over exaggerate. I'm trying to just be real about this. Are we free if the government can pull out that act? And if they can pull it out for something as innocuous and benign as the Freedom Convoy, a bunch of people blocking streets, that's the only crime that any of these people committed, was blocking the streets, and they used this act. If they can do that, then are we really free in this country? I would argue no. To just have that act brought out for something as non-threatening as a bunch of protesters in front of the Parliament buildings blocking traffic, I worry about the freedom of Canada, and it makes me want to move to the United States where this would never be allowed. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if this happened in the US? People would lose their minds. All the freedom people in Texas would go crazy, and we should do the same. We should be going crazy about this. This Emergency Measures Act should be taken out, completely eliminated. It's not necessary. It infringes on our Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and I think it's completely wrong. If you agree, if you disagree, put some comments in where you find this video. And thanks for listening to the Underground podcast, where we talk about the world and how crazy and weird and messed up it is. I'm your host, Duncan Michael McPherson. Thanks everybody for listening. Bye.